Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is Pro-Revenge Story. I work in an office with a guy I'll call Jake. Jake is that coworker everyone knows. Lazy, always passing his work onto someone else, and somehow always getting away with it. He'll sit around on his phone or go to the bathroom every 10 minutes. He's the kind of guy who will show up late, make some lame excuse about traffic, and then disappear for lunch for 2 hours. For the past 3 months since January 2025, Jake's favorite target has been me. He'll send emails asking if I can help out with a project, but what he really means is, do all the work while I take the credit. I complained to my manager Diane a couple of times, but somehow Jake always managed to weasel his way out of trouble. The final straw came when he passed off a major report that was due to a client in 2 days, dumping it on me last minute. "Hey, can you take a look at this data for the Westfield account?" Jake asked, hovering by my desk one Friday afternoon. I'm swamped with other stuff. I glanced at his monitor, which clearly showed he was scrolling through social media. "What's the deadline?" "Monday morning," he said with a shrug. "No big deal, right? You're good at this stuff." One day I casually asked him if he was good with Excel, and he admitted he didn't know much about it. "Nah, not really my thing," Jake said. "I'm more of a big picture guy, you know?" Perfect. The next time Jake tried to dump a bunch of spreadsheets on me to organize for his next quarterly report, I agreed. But this time, I embedded a series of hidden formulas into the documents. These formulas didn't do anything important, just enough to mess with the numbers if someone didn't know how to check for hidden cells. It took me a little time, but I was careful not to make it too obvious. The kicker: every time Jake tried to copy and paste the data into his report, it would scramble everything just enough to be completely useless. "Here you go," I said, sending him the files. "I've organized everything for you." "Thanks, man," Jake replied, not even bothering to look at what I'd sent. "You're a lifesaver." On the day the report was due, Jake slacked off like usual, assuming I had handled it like always. When the client called, furious because the report was filled with nonsense numbers, Jake panicked. He rushed to fix it, but every time he tried to fix one part of the report, something else would break. He came to me frantic and asked for help. "Dude, the Miller report is completely messed up," Jake said, practically sweating through his shirt. "Everything's wrong and the client is freaking out." I acted confused and said, "Oh, I don't know what happened. Maybe it's a glitch? Did you check for hidden formulas?" "Hidden what? Can you just fix it?" he pleaded. "I'm in the middle of my own deadline," I replied, giving him an apologetic look. "Have you tried refreshing the data connection?" I gave him some more vague advice and watched as he spent the entire day trying to salvage his mess. "I don't understand," he muttered, clicking frantically. "It keeps changing when I update it." Our boss found out, and for once, Jake couldn't talk his way out of it. Diane called him into her office, and even through the closed door, we could hear her voice rising. "This is completely unacceptable," she said. "This is the third time this quarter we've had issues with your reports." He got lambasted for screwing up such an important project and was put on temporary leave without pay. When he returned a week later, he was much quieter and started actually doing his own work. "Hey," he said to me on his first day back, "could you maybe show me how to use some of those Excel functions?" I smiled. "Sure thing, Jake. Happy to help." I guess he'll be doing his own work from now on. The next one is an entitled people story. I inherited a small vacation cabin from my uncle about 3 years ago. It's nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom place tucked away in the woods about 4 hours from where I live. My wife and I would head up there maybe once a month during the warmer seasons, and we'd rent it out occasionally through a property management company to help cover the taxes and maintenance costs. The property manager handled everything from bookings to cleaning, so it was pretty hands-off for us. Last summer, we decided to take a 2-week trip to the cabin in July. I contacted the property manager to block off those dates, making sure there were no bookings during that time. Everything seemed fine. We loaded up the car with supplies, our dog, and headed up on a Friday afternoon, already planning out our hikes and fishing spots. When we pulled up to the cabin around dinner time, I immediately knew something was wrong. There were 2 cars parked in the driveway, lights were on inside, and I could hear music playing. My first thought was that the property manager had screwed up and double-booked the place. Annoying, but fixable. I walked up to the door and knocked. A woman in her mid-30s answered, looking confused about why I was knocking on what she apparently thought was her door. I explained that I was the owner, and that there must have been some kind of booking error. That's when things got weird. She told me they weren't renting the place. They were staying there because it had been empty and they needed somewhere to stay for the summer. I stood there trying to process what she'd just said. The cabin hadn't been empty, we'd been using it and renting it out regularly. I asked her how she even got inside, and she explained that they'd found a lockbox with a key code that a previous renter must have shared online. Apparently, some former guests had posted about their stay on social media, and included details about the lockbox location and code, which we'd since changed for regular renters, but this family had tried the old code and somehow jimmied the new lock. I told her they needed to leave immediately. That's when her husband appeared, and this guy was a piece of work. He immediately got confrontational, saying they had nowhere else to go and that we were being unreasonable. I explained, as calmly as I could, that this was my property, they were trespassing, and they needed to pack up and get out. Then came the kicker. He told me that they'd been living there for almost 3 weeks already, which technically made them tenants under squatters' rights, and that I couldn't just kick them out without going through a formal eviction process. He said this with such confidence, like he'd researched it and knew exactly what he was talking about. His wife chimed in, adding that they had 2 kids who were finally settled and comfortable, and it would be cruel to displace children. I looked past them and saw 2 teenagers, probably around 15 and 17, lounging on my couch, eating my food from the pantry we'd stocked before the last rental and playing video games on a TV they'd apparently brought with them. The place was a mess. There were clothes everywhere, dirty dishes piled up, and it smelled like they hadn't taken the trash out in days. My wife, who had been waiting in the car, came up to see what was taking so long. When I explained the situation, she was livid. She suggested we just call the police right then and there, but the husband actually laughed and said we could try, but the police would tell us it was a civil matter and we'd have to go through the courts. He seemed very pleased with himself, like he'd found some kind of legal loophole that made him untouchable. Here's where the malicious compliance comes in. He looked me right in the eye and said that if I had a problem with them staying there, I should go ahead and press charges, take them to court, do whatever I wanted legally. He said it with this smug attitude, clearly thinking that the process would take months, cost me a fortune in legal fees, and that in the meantime, they'd get to stay in my cabin rent-free. His exact words were something like, "If you think you can do something about this, go right ahead and try." So that's exactly what I did. I called the police from my cell phone right there in the driveway. When the officers arrived about 30 minutes later, I showed them my deed to the property, explained that these people had broken in and were refusing to leave, and that they'd been there for 3 weeks without my permission or knowledge. The husband maintained his story about squatters' rights and tenancy laws, but the officers explained that breaking and entering doesn't establish tenancy, especially when the property owner actively uses and rents the property. The family was given an official trespass warning and told they had to leave immediately. They argued, the wife started crying about their kids, but the officers made it clear they could either leave voluntarily or be arrested for criminal trespass. They chose to leave, but not before the husband told me I was making a huge mistake and that I'd regret this, but I wasn't done. See, they'd told me to press charges if I had a problem, and I took that advice very seriously. Over the next few days, I documented everything. I took photos of the damage to my property. They'd broken the lock on the back door, stained the carpet in the master bedroom, cracked a window, and left the place absolutely filthy. I itemized everything they'd stolen or consumed from the cabin, including food, firewood, propane, and even some tools from the shed. I contacted my property manager to get records showing the cabin had been actively booked and used, proving it wasn't abandoned. Then I called my lawyer. I explained the situation and asked what my options were. He told me I could absolutely press criminal charges for breaking and entering, theft, and criminal trespass. But he also suggested I could pursue a civil case for damages, lost rental income, and the cost of cleaning and repairs. I told him to do both. Press every charge possible, pursue maximum penalties, and sue them for everything we could. The criminal charges went through the district attorney's office. Because they'd broken the lock to gain entry, it qualified as breaking and entering, which in our state is a felony. The theft of property, even though it was mostly food and supplies, added up to several $100s, making it grand theft. And because they'd been warned by police and this established a clear pattern of intentional trespass, the DA was actually interested in prosecuting. The civil suit was straightforward. We sued for property damage, which came to about $3,000 after getting repair estimates. We sued for the value of stolen items, the cost of professional deep cleaning, and lost rental income for the 3 weeks they'd occupied the cabin, plus the additional weeks we had to block off for repairs. We also included our legal fees and travel expenses. About a month later, my lawyer called with an update. The entitled family had actually hired their own attorney, who'd apparently told them they had no case and should try to settle. But here's where their arrogance really cost them. They refused. The husband was still convinced he'd done nothing wrong and that the courts would side with them. Their lawyer withdrew from the case. The criminal trial came first. I had to take a day off work to testify, but it was worth it. The prosecution presented all the evidence, the broken lock, the police reports, my documentation, everything. The family's defense was basically that they'd thought the cabin was abandoned and they'd meant no harm. The jury didn't buy it. They were convicted on all counts. Here's where things really fell apart for them. During the sentencing phase, it came out that the husband was on probation for a previous theft charge from 2 years ago. This new conviction violated his probation, which meant he was facing serious jail time. The wife was sentenced to probation, community service, and ordered to pay restitution. The husband got 18 months in county jail, but the consequences didn't stop there. The husband lost his job. He'd been working as a warehouse manager, and they fired him immediately after the conviction. The wife worked in healthcare, and having a theft conviction on her record triggered a review by the state licensing board. She ended up losing her nursing license. The civil case was almost anticlimactic after that. They didn't show up to court, which meant we won by default. The judge awarded us everything we'd asked for, plus additional damages for the hassle. The total judgment was around $25,000 when everything was added up. Now here's the really devastating part that I only found out about later. Because of the criminal convictions and the civil judgment, Child Protective Services got involved. Someone had reported that the parents' decisions had left their family homeless and that the children were living in unstable conditions. The teenagers ended up going to live with relatives in another state while their parents dealt with the legal fallout. The family had to sell their house to pay off the civil judgment and legal fees. The wife couldn't work in nursing anymore and ended up taking a minimum wage job. The husband was in jail, and when he got out, he had a felony record that made finding employment nearly impossible. They ended up declaring bankruptcy. I learned all this through my lawyer, who stayed in touch with their attorney about payment of the judgment. Apparently, the husband had told people in jail that he'd only suggested we press charges because he thought it was an empty threat, something that would scare us off or that we wouldn't follow through on. He never imagined we'd actually pursue criminal charges and a civil suit simultaneously. My wife and I did eventually get to use the cabin that summer, just a bit later than planned. After everything was cleaned and repaired, it actually looked better than before. We even upgraded the security system and installed cameras, just in case. Looking back, I sometimes wonder if I went too far. My wife says absolutely not. They broke into our property, stole from us, trashed the place, and then had the arrogance to dare us to do something about it. Some of my friends think the consequences were disproportionate to the crime, that maybe I should have just scared them a bit and let it go. But here's the thing. They made a choice. They chose to break into someone's property. They chose to stay there for 3 weeks. They chose to lie about squatters' rights and refuse to leave. And most importantly, they chose to challenge me to press charges, thinking I wouldn't do it or that nothing would happen if I did. I just did exactly what they told me to do. They said if I had a problem, I should press charges and take them to court. So I pressed every charge I could, pursued every legal remedy available, and let the justice system do its job. That's not being vindictive. That's just taking someone at their word. The property manager felt terrible about the whole thing and gave us a year of free management services as an apology, even though the security breach wasn't really their fault. We still use the cabin regularly, and it's actually generated some good rental income now that we've marketed it better. As for the entitled family, I have no idea where they ended up. The judgment follows them for years, and they'll be paying it off in small amounts for a long time. Sometimes I think about those teenagers and feel a bit bad for them. None of this was their fault. But their parents made choices that had consequences, and those consequences rippled through their entire family. The next one is a petty revenge story. For years, I asked my husband to consider therapy to better our communication and our relationship. For years, I tried to work on myself and communicate better, explain my feelings, my hurt, how he put me down or was condescending and how much it hurt, how I just needed his kind words. I just wanted to feel loved and important to him. I didn't ask for fancy things, just kindness. For years, I asked him to spend some time with me and make plans, and he said it's exhausting for him to make plans, and weekends stress him out because he has to figure out how to take me out. Told me to just go hang out with my family. I did inner work, I did therapy, I applied a lot of what I learned in that and couples counseling. I tried to adjust to his likings and become more of a homebody. I listened to his critique and what was important to him and worked on it. He'd say we should do things that he likes all the time, like play certain sports or exercise or build stuff. But the thing is, when I tried those things, A, either he was condescending when I tried to learn, B, he'd suggest times that were impossible for me because I was the one putting little one to sleep and it'd be late night. For years, I tried to tell him that when he continues to only prioritize his work, his phone, the dang phone is always in his hands, breakfast, lunch, dinner, office, bed, his hobbies, waiting until retirement to relax and spend time with me, his words. When he chose all that before me and Kiddo, eventually a day will come when he'll have everything, a ton of money and that amazing house and cars he wants, except no one to share it with because me and Kiddo will be long gone. Well, slowly I started living life without him, eating meals alone because he'd be on his phone anyway, or just talk about work that needed to be done, or critique me, give off-putting remarks, no love, affection, appreciation, etc. So it was better to be alone than in his company. I started making plans without him, went on an all-day beach outing without him on a particular day when he was being nasty to me, started learning the sports he played, but without him, started going to work out. Without him, started prioritizing my health and well-being, without him. His jealousy showed, but instead of saying, "Hey, let's do something together," he would say, "Oh, you shouldn't be wasting your time with those women, that club sounds like a waste of time," etc. Basically trying to isolate me from the new hobbies I wanted to do with other people. So guess what? I continued them and just didn't tell him about it anymore. So even before leaving physically, I have checked out. It's sad, yes, but he chose this. He chose not to listen when I pleaded for his kindness, his time, his attention, his love. He chose to be nasty and condescending and mean and mock me. He chose to prioritize his phone instead of hearing when I said, "Hey, can we have phone-free zones?" He chose to go out late with others or spend time with his family all day and night when I sat there waiting for him to have 10 minutes for me. He chose to take international trips months long without me. He chose to mock and make fun of our kiddo. He failed to do the work to be a positive leader in the house, so he had it coming. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Early last year, we had a new manager take over the department. He previously headed another IT department in Germany, but moved to Switzerland to take the role in ours. Our team is spread over Switzerland, Spain, and Mexico, with second line in Spain and Mexico, and third line in Switzerland and Spain. It was a few months before he started making changes, and they were mostly small. We had to record how much time we spent on tickets, provide weekly updates on our changes and projects, and our monthly department meeting became fortnightly. It meant a bit more bureaucracy here and there, but it was mostly fine, nothing excessive. But about 6 months in, he made a change that none of us really liked. While Switzerland and Spain are both in the same time zone, in reality, our times don't really line up. Employees in Switzerland will start at any time between 7 o'clock and 8:30, while Spain can start later than 9 o'clock. Lunch in Switzerland is often from 11:30 to 12:30, while Spain will wait until 13 o'clock or later. Home time in Switzerland ranges from 15:30 to 17:30, while the team in Spain will often be online until 18 o'clock. This means that meetings between the third-line teams usually take place between 9 o'clock to 11:30 and 14 o'clock to 16 o'clock. That is about 4.5 hours a day. Outside of those times, you risk people not having started yet, having already gone home, or being out for lunch. This is what our new manager didn't like. While he couldn't really do much about lunch times, he saw the opportunity to align our start and end times. After reviewing people's calendars, he determined that enforcing an 8 o'clock to 17 o'clock working day would cause the least amount of disruption to our schedules. This would increase the number of hours where we're all available by 2 per day or 10 per week. When he told us about the change, none of us were happy. Even those that wouldn't be impacted because it already aligned with their usual start and finish times were annoyed on behalf of those who would be impacted. When we asked why the change was being made, we were simply told it was about us all being online together more. Some people complained that it would impact out-of-work commitments, and we were told he would make allowances, but only temporarily. One guy said that he only takes a 30-minute lunch break, so this would mean he goes over his weekly hours. The manager said he would look into that. Then an older member of the team asked if he had run it by HR. The manager said no, this isn't something he needs to run by HR. The same guy then asked if we would have to start recording our hours. The manager said no, this has nothing to do with recording hours. Turns out the manager made a mistake here. You see, in Switzerland, by law, employees need to record their working hours, and employers need to retain records to ensure compliance with labor laws. There are, however, a few exceptions. Smaller companies can simply record the number of hours worked each day. Meanwhile, senior employees can be exempted from logging their hours if they meet a certain salary threshold, and their role allows for autonomy in the hours worked. All the engineers on the team based in Switzerland had signed this waiver. It wasn't uncommon for us to work 11 hours on one day and then 5 hours on the next. It wasn't uncommon for us to work 30 hours in 1 week, then 50 hours the next. We never recorded these hours. We never explicitly told our team leaders or manager. It was simply understood that some days or weeks would be busy, and as we managed our own time, we would make up for it later. We were trusted to manage our own time, And if we didn't sign the waiver to exclude us from logging our hours, it would create a mess for overtime, time off in lieu, etc. But one of the conditions for signing this waiver was that we were free to determine the majority of our working hours, which courts had clarified was defined as 50%. If we are contracted to work 40 hours a week, then our employer can fix 20 of those hours, and we can choose when to take the other 20. The manager had now fixed 100% of our hours. We were no longer eligible for the exception granted to us. For us, we could continue working the dictated hours and legally we would be fine. But if someone reported our employer to the government, the company could be fined and potentially be forced to log all employees' working hours, or lose the ability to file working time waivers, that is, engineers couldn't work out of hours to perform maintenance and updates. The impact to the company could be huge. So the guy that asked the question went straight to HR and informed them of the manager's new policy. HR, recognizing the legal risk that such a policy could create for the company, went straight to the manager's director. The policy was put on hold later that day. On the Friday of the same week, another meeting was held. The manager apologized for not familiarizing himself with Swiss labor laws before implementing the policy and instead decided to implement a new one, which would be legally compliant. Spain would continue with the 8 o'clock to 17 o'clock working hours. For Switzerland, 50% of our working hours would be fixed, 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock and 15 o'clock to 17 o'clock. In short, the first and last 2 hours of the day were fixed, and we'd have to fill in the rest with our free hours. It was dubious at best. I look at my calendar for Monday and see I have a meeting at 11 o'clock and another one at 15 o'clock, so I quickly ping a message to the two people on the 11 o'clock meeting. Then Monday comes around. At 6 o'clock I log in and see the two other members of the team I'd spoken to on Friday are logged in from home. I drop them a message to say hi. Our plans are to work until 10 o'clock and then log off until 11 o'clock when we have a meeting together with some of the team in Spain, take lunch from 11:30 to 13:30, then finish at 17 o'clock. Two people arrive in the office at 7 o'clock, having planned to take a 2-hour lunch break in the city. The rest of the team based in Switzerland, another 4 people, logged in at 8 o'clock and quickly hear what the other half of the team were doing. One was working from home, so wanted to be done as soon as possible, and one had an appointment at 17:30, so had to stick to the manager's implied schedule. But the other two that were in the office had free time that evening. At 11:30, they left the office, returning just before 15 o'clock, having spent the afternoon on a boat sailing around Lake Zurich. At 17 o'clock, they both left the office and clocked up the rest of their hours working from home. On Tuesday, the fixed hours for the teams in both Switzerland and Spain were scrapped. The manager left the department a few months later. The next one is an entitled people story. I have few apartments that I rent out, and today one of the tenants moved out. So I went over for the cursory inspection and key handover and paperwork. This guy has been an exemplary tenant over the years, and today was no exception. The place had been cleared out and cleaned, and checking off the boxes was a formality. When I got there, the only thing left there was the internet modem. This particular apartment had had a family member living in it years ago, and I had arranged the internet for the place. When this tenant moved in, let's call him Moose, because he looks identical to the Moose from Archie Comics. Just for the sake of simplicity, we agreed to just leave the internet as is and add an extra $50 to the rent. No problem. This was back in 2018. Assuming the next tenant can look after whatever they want with respect to internet and cable and phone bundle and whatever, I plan to cancel the service and return the equipment. I unplugged the modem and cables and left it on the kitchen counter while we reviewed the unit and the paperwork. While looking around, his phone buzzed a few times and rang once. He, very politely, unlike many people these days, ignored all of that while we were walking and talking. But then, there was a knock at the door. Weird. I'd arranged a viewing of the place while I was here, but how did they get in? Nobody buzzed them in, and there's no way to get to the right floor if you're not buzzed in. Moose opens the door, but it's not the people coming to view the place. It's the next-door neighbor. Let's call her Veronica. She comes in, and there's a bit of, "Oh, you're moving out, where are you going, blah blah," chit-chat, but she's eyeing the modem sitting on the counter. Eventually, she says something like, would it be okay to plug that back in? I was actually using it." Using what? The internet? The Wi-Fi? Yes, indeed. Turns out, back in 2020, at the start of the pandemic, her office shut down and her job turned into full-time work from home. And at some point early in the pandemic, she had some internet issues and asked Moose if she could hop on his Wi-Fi, which had a clear signal to her place until her issues were resolved. Sure, no problem, he said at the time. Fast forward more than 5 years, and it turns out she long ago canceled her own service and is full-time running her office, smart TV, and phone off my Moose's Wi-Fi. And now that the plug got pulled, she wants it back. She's offering to give Moose money, but please, plug it in. It's Friday. I need to work, and I need it over the weekend. I'll sort it out on Monday. Moose doesn't know what to say. Neither do I, to be honest. The truth is, Moose never noticed it. It's high speed and clearly enough for everyone's devices. And the monthly contract lands in the middle of the month for some reason, so it's actually paid for the next 2 weeks. In the midst of that, someone buzzes from downstairs. It's the people for the viewing. Archie and Betty, I guess. They come up, and then oddly, Veronica and Betty know each other. They go the same Pilates studio and often run into each other. Oh, it'd be so much fun if you move in. We could go to class together, yada yada. Veronica offers to take the modem, plug it in at her place, and promises to deal with Shaw Cable, to just take it over since it's all working. I'm not sure it works like that, and you can't just take the equipment next door and have it work. Let me try. Okay, go ahead. She leaves with the modem, having agreed to deal with Shaw and return the hardware if needed, which actually saves me a lot of hassle. So she leaves, and a few minutes later texts that it's working and thank you so much. I spoke to Shaw and explained the situation, canceled the service effective end of the billing cycle. Veronica has a couple of weeks to set up an account, and they'll either just move the existing equipment over to it, or she can swap for new hardware. Either way, I'm done with it. So, I don't know. Entitled person? She made a comment at one point which has to have been tongue-in-cheek because it's so outrageous. Something like, "Oh, come on, please leave it on. Don't be cheap, haha." Yes, I'm possibly the cheap one while you've been getting my free Wi-Fi for half a decade. Edit. A couple of weeks later. Not a story that really needs an update, but there's actually an interesting footnote to all of this. Moose contacted me last week asking if it was okay to share my email with Veronica. Sure, go ahead. I'm sure she just wants to send some sort of thanks and/or apology. No problem. I should mention that Moose's message prompted me to call Shaw to make sure the account has been closed and all is good, especially with respect to the equipment I left with Veronica. And yes, she'd returned it, and the account was now closed with nothing owing. Not sure if she opened a new account and got new equipment, or if she chose a different provider, and of course not my issue. She returned the stuff like she said she would, and that's that. But the interesting footnote is this. This morning I received an email from Veronica. It was indeed a letter of gratitude for the free internet for years, and also an apology, recognizing how it was somewhat inappropriate. And also included in the email, a $200 gift certificate, good at a few local restaurants, one of which happens to be among my favorites. I wasn't expecting that, and it's a nice gesture, and that's pretty much it, but I kind of like this entire saga because it's left me thinking. In this day and age where everything is right or wrong, black or white, good or bad, I'm still not sure where Veronica lands on the spectrum. Comments have ranged from, she's an evil thief, to she did nothing wrong. And whatever side you picked, it's certainly somewhat mitigated by this thoughtful gift certificate. If there's anything to learn from all of this, perhaps it's that life is just like that. Lots of gray area, not just black and white, and Veronica, like all of us, is just navigating it as best she can. That vast majority of us aren't evil psychos, nor are we sinless saints. We're all in the gray area just doing our thing, and we can simultaneously be good, bad, right, wrong, etc. Maybe that's the real takeaway from all of this, because as I said, I myself am still puzzled by the whole thing. Anyway,